Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are meeting this time in English to see an example of an actual synthesis. So I've talked to you about the methodology. This time I'm going to show you how to apply the methodology to an actual paper. I will be doing this one in English just because it will be easier for me to not switch back and forth from French to English. Right, so let's get started. So this is the blank exam I gave my students this year, and this is what we're going to work on. Keep in mind that this video will be an overview of the methodology, and obviously I won't say everything there is to say about the paper. So the first thing you can notice is that I have already prepared my draft paper with 3 columns for the table, which is going to help us in our analysis afterwards. So the first thing you need to do on the day of the exam is to actually have a look at the 2 subjects you are going to be given. Remember that on the day of the exam you will have 2 potential papers and you can choose whichever you prefer. So remember to take 10 minutes at the beginning of the exam to read through everything and to decide which one you want to go for. Once you have selected one, the first thing you need to do is to concentrate on the actual question and to remember keywords. So here the first keywords we'll have would be painful emotions, so pain and emotion, and mental health. Here what I would advise you to do is to take 5 minutes to think about potential ideas which would go with these keywords. So for example, when we think about pain, we can also think about pleasure, or when we think about mental health, we would also think about depression or suicide, or maybe even PTSD. So the first thing you have to do is to read these keywords and try to think about other keywords which might help you in your analysis. Once you have done this part, you can go to your draft paper and just at the top write down the keywords which are going to be essential to your analysis. So here these keywords would be pain, or let's write painful emotions because this is after all the topic, and mental health. This will help you to stay focused on the actual topic of the exam. Once you have done that, let's now have a look at the translation. If you want, you can do the translation first and the synthesis afterwards, or you can start with the synthesis and keep the translation afterwards. I would recommend minimum 30 minutes to work on the translation. Ideally 45 minutes, 40 to 45 minutes would be good. Let's have a look at the different documents. So we first have literary extract from Mrs. Dalloway, written by Virginia Woolf in 1925. We then have an article by Vivian Manning Schaffel, written in 2021. And lastly, we have a self-portrait by Francis Bacon in 1973. So already you can see that the dates are not similar, they're not from the same era. This might be important when you're studying the evolution of a certain topic. So going back to your draft paper, what I want you to do, well, not what I want you to do, but what you can do is write down the titles, the author, and the date. This will help you when you are preparing the plan. Okay, so the second document I will write as an article about catharsis and healing by Manning Schaffel in 2021. And the last one we said is a self-portrait by Bacon in 1973. Right, so already we can see that here you have keywords with catharsis and healing, which would go with the idea of painful emotions and mental health, but we'll go to that afterwards. So once that you have analyzed the question and the keywords and you have read through the different documents, you can start the analysis. So now we are going to concentrate on each document one after the other and try to find specific elements about them. So let's start with the literary document, the extract from Mrs. Dalloway, and see what we can find in terms of style and literary devices. So the first thing we can notice is here the word dead, and the idea of painful emotions would go well here. He had been killed in the war, so we're definitely talking about the lexical field of death. So what you would do, you would go here in your draft, on your draft paper, and you write lexical field of death, and you can put down the lines where you have the examples, so line 1 and line 3. Who were killed in the war, so we definitely have repetition here, the idea of death. If someone was killed in the war, in terms of the context, it was probably in the First World War, so we might talk about war trauma, and if it's war trauma, then it might be PTSD. Remember, this is what we talked about when we talked about mental health issues. Okay, horrible, I think, is important, considering the word we've talked about. Ooh, interesting. So here we have a comparison and a repetition, stranger and stranger. So we can talk about this feeling of being estranged. Being estranged is the idea of being rejected from society. Here, his wife, Lucretia, is describing him as being strange. People, he would argue, killing themselves. Right, so here he has hallucinations. So he's losing touch with reality. This is also something we might write. And we have the repetition of people. So here this is interesting because this goes with the idea of being estranged. There's a form of estrangement. He's being alienated from the rest of the population, and this is why he's describing people as people. Killing themselves, once more, we have the lexical field of death. Wicked, this would go with horrible, so the notion of despair. Okay, so here we have a literary device, arguing, laughing, crying, getting very excited. So this would be an enumeration, more specifically an ascendeton, and this would add to the overwhelming effect of his despair. So we'll write despair, overwhelming despair, which would work well here. We have people once more. Oh, sorry. We have people once more. Let me put that in a different color so that it's easier to understand. Right, so we'll stop there. I won't do the whole text, but this is how you can proceed. Keeping in mind the keywords we mentioned and you have written above your table, you can start analyzing the document and finding elements, finding examples which would work with these keywords. So it's important to remember that you can find arguments and you can also find examples, but not to mistake one for the other. So remember, if we say that his mental health issues are causing him to be alienated from the rest of the population, that is the argument, and the example would be the repetition of the comparison stranger and stranger, and the repetition of people in the enumeration of his hallucinations. So that would be the example. The argument is a concept, the example is an actual quote or analysis from the text. So now let's move on to the second document. The second document is an article in non-literary work. Usually in non-literary works you will have more difficulty to find literary devices, and that's okay. It's simply because we don't use literary devices as much when we write articles. If you do have a speech, however, you might want to look at repetition, enumeration, and other literary devices. It's okay. If you do find some, great. If you don't, no matter. Try to concentrate instead on concepts and keywords, because this is what we would tend to use in an article. So let's have a look at the different concepts, keywords, and maybe literary devices if we can find them. So the first thing here I can notice is the notion of catharsis. So I think that this is a very important keyword, keeping in mind what we've talked about before. Catharsis is the expression of painful emotions or very strong emotions in order to cleanse yourself from within and in order to heal. So here, expressing painful emotions through art will help you better your mental health. So we are definitely in the topic selected for this paper. Expression of pain through art, so we're definitely the notion of catharsis. Seeking connection and validation. So this is really good because it is connected to the notion of community. And in the first document we had the opposite, we had loneliness. So this might be interesting to have a look at. Let's write down connection and validation. So the idea is community. And obviously later on we have empathy and compassion. So definitely this notion of community is very important. Connection, so let's add this. Connection, validation, empathy and compassion. Okay, perfect. So here we have alone and isolated. This goes perfectly with the idea we had in the first document, the idea of being lonely and being estranged from the rest of the population. So this is really good. So let's write this down. You're not the first person to have been through it. So basically, expressing your emotions will allow you to create a community of people who have been through the same things. So this is really good. We can keep this in mind for our plan afterwards. Clarity and distance, a sense of control. These would be keywords, important keywords about healing. And absolutely a more positive and healthy place. This is also about healing. Okay, so towards the end we do have a literary device. We have a repetition here. In the music we listen to, the art we observe, the films we have, and the writing we read. This is an ascendeton with repetition at the beginning with the same structure, where the structure is being repeated. And we have different mediums. So this is interesting because the first document is a novel, and the second document obviously is an article, but also talking about music. We see that a singer is being interviewed. We have quotes from him, and the last document is a painting. Okay, so let's quickly analyze the third document, the self-portrait. Remember that on the day of the exam you will not have a picture with colors, it will be in black and white. So instead of concentrating on colors, try to concentrate on contrast and on lighting. So here we'll try to do that. The first thing we notice in terms of contrast is that we have a very strong contrast between the face and the background. The dark background suggests a void, so it can be the idea of loneliness that we found in the first document and that was mentioned in the second document as well. When you have a picture like this, be it a photograph or a painting, try to pay attention to the title, because the title will help you understand and better analyze the document. So here, self-portrait, we know that the painter is representing himself, but not his appearance, his physical appearance, rather the way he perceives himself mentally and he perceives his mental health. So we can write down self-perception. And this is very negative, so it might be depression or anxiety. The movement of the brush strokes could suggest a form of a vicious circle. And then elements which seem human, where we know that it's a human head, wouldn't be the mouth, because half of it is disappearing into the background. It would probably be the ear, so the act of listening to someone, but also the eyes. And remember, we are communicating with people through the eyes, through our eyes. So this could be an element of empathy and compassion, communicating with your eyes and listening to other people. So we'll write this down as well. Right, so once you have done this with all the documents, I went quite fast over them all, but you could do this very thoroughly. I would recommend at least 1 hour to analyze everything and prepare your plan before you actually start writing. I think that 1 hour of analysis would be a good basis. When you know your documents, it will be easier to organize your plan afterwards and to refer to them when you are writing down your development. So now what you can do is to find connections between the documents. This is the part where you take your highlighters or your different colors and you try within your table to organize them all in different ideas. So the first thing we'll have is, I think, something which is very striking is this notion of community feeling or loneliness. So in the first document, we had a character who was extremely lonely, so you can highlight this loneliness. We also have this idea of loneliness in the third document with the contrast between the face and the background. And it's also mentioned in the second document with being alone and isolated. But this idea is opposed by the notion of compassion and community once you are expressing these emotions. So this would be a second element, and we also have it in the last document. So here what could be interesting is to have a look at the first document and see if you can find elements of community and compassion and empathy in the first document. Then we definitely have trauma or death or despair. So let's write despair, which would go with depression and anxiety, and the idea of catharsis, which is the expression of pain. So as you see, this is the part where you're trying to find common points between the different documents. Are they similar? Is the point of view different or opposed? Once you have done that, you can start thinking about a plan. I think that here the easiest plan would be to go with the definition of catharsis, which is expressing painful emotions to heal. Remember, a plan with 3 parts is not expected. If you want to do 2 parts, you can. If you want to do 3 parts, you can. But this will impact the number of subparts you do. I usually recommend 3 subparts for a 2-part plan and 2 subparts for a 3-part plan. But this is really up to you. So in expressing painful emotions, we would talk about despair, we would talk about trauma, for example, but also loneliness. I'm just putting down ideas, and in the second part we would put elements like compassion and community. Now when you are preparing your plan, this is where you put your different arguments and where you put your different examples. Remember not to mistake one for the other. Once you are finished with all of this, you can start writing the essay. That concludes this example. I hope it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments. I will see you soon, and if I don't in the meantime, good luck for the exam. Bye bye everyone.